And on this Veterans Day, we are remembering the people who fought for our country. More than 1 million black soldiers served in World War II, and their contributions were vital to our victory. Matthew F. Delmont is a history professor at Dartmouth College and a Guggenheim Fellow and expert of African American history who dives into the history of World War II from the black perspective. Delmont's new book, Half American, the epic story of African Americans fighting World War II at home and abroad, details what it meant to be a black soldier during the war and how their patriotism abroad never wavered in the face of racism in a segregated America. So joining us now is the author himself. Matthew, thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Thanks for having me.
Well, let's talk about the title of this book first, Half American. You included a quote from a letter to a black newspaper. It was written by a man named James G. Thompson, and he wrote, "Should I sacrifice my life to live half American? Is the America I know worth defending?" Did his words resonate with you and really serve, as inspiration for the title of the book?
So that letter from James Thompson, he was a 26-year-old from Wichita, Kansas. He writes that letter to the Pittsburgh Courier, which at the time is the largest and most influential black newspaper in the country. He's writing in December of 1941 after the bombing of Pearl Harbor because he knows that he and other black Americans are about to be drafted into a segregated military. So that phrase, "should I sacrifice my life to live half American?" it just really stuck with me for the 7 years I worked on this book. Because he was asking a really profound question. What does it mean to serve a country that doesn't yet treat you as a full citizen? Thompson ended up serving in the Army, as did more than 1 million black Americans. And one of the real goals of the book is to try to honor those black veterans.
Wow. It's an incredible question that one would have to ask themselves. And you detail the roles of these black servicemen and the women, and you talk about how they were treated abroad as well. What are some of the stories that really stood out to you and what they talked about, during that time period?
So these stories that black veterans tell about their service during World War II are so powerful because they're deeply patriotic. They want to do everything they can to help win the war effort. The rallying cry for black Americans during World War II was the double victory campaign, because they were fighting for victory over fascism abroad, but also victory over racism at home. And so these black soldiers are doing everything they can to help defeat the Nazis in Germany, help defeat the Japanese army in the Pacific theater. But at the same time, they're fighting battles for freedom and democracy at home.
You write about Thurgood Marshall's efforts to uncover violence and racism experienced by black troops and veterans. Can you talk about some of the details within this investigation and what eventually came out of it?
So during the war, Thurgood Marshall, who is, of course, best known as the first black Supreme Court justice, during the war, he is the head of the legal division for the NAACP, and he's traveling all across the country investigating claims and acts of violence against black troops while they're still in the United States. He's going to bases in Alabama and Georgia, and then as far west as California in the Bay Area. And he's reporting on how black troops are being harassed, both on military bases, but also in the towns that surround these bases. He's trying to make sure that military officials are being held to account and actually trying to treat black soldiers with the respect they deserve. Things got so bad for a lot of these black troops during the war that they were writing letters back to the NAACP saying that they would feel safer once they deployed to the European theater or the Pacific theater than they would on these army bases in Alabama and Georgia. And so we really can't understand Thurgood Marshall's life as a civil rights hero without understanding the work he does during World War II.
And so they're experiencing this, but can you tell me more about, the black participation and the overall eagerness that some of these soldiers had to serve this country?
One of the hardest things to come across as a historian and looking at evidence from this time period was after the bombing of Pearl Harbor, there are dozens of stories of black men and women going to local recruiting offices to volunteer to join the military, only to be turned away because at that point, the military didn't have enough black-only units to be able to assign these black volunteers to. And these black volunteers were just left dumbstruck because they want to join the military effort. They want to help defend their country, but they're turned away because of the color of their skin.
Well, and, for a lot of people, this is the first time they're hearing stories about this. Talk to me about the importance of retelling black history so that people hear these stories.
I think particularly on Veterans Day, it's important to talk honestly about the history of World War II. Sometimes we'd like to think that the country was more unified during World War II, but when you actually look at the evidence, that's just not the case. The entire military was racially segregated during the war, and black troops and civilians were harassed consistently while they were here in the United States. They felt as though they were fighting a war here in the United States before they ever even had a chance to go abroad to fight the war. I think it's important to talk honestly about that history for two reasons. One, it's important to honor the service of Black veterans, without whom America and the Allies couldn't have won the war. But it's also important for us today, because if we can't reckon honestly with that history, we won't be able to understand how so many of those issues are still with us today, in terms of voting rights, in terms of racial equality.
Well, it was incredibly important. Matthew, thank you so much for being with us tonight. We appreciate it. And his book, Half American, the epic story of African Americans fighting World War II at home and abroad, is out wherever books are sold.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.